Hello, today we will explore how operating partners can drive value creation at pace with generative AI. My name is Ross Gordon and I'm head of the private equity practice across EMEA. Today we are joined by Lisa Weaver-Lambert. Lisa is an AI specialist who's recently written a book called The AI Value Playbook. Lisa, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we kick off, Lisa, can you give our viewers a flavour of where your career's come to date and your journey into AI?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the introduction. So my background is I'm very interested in languages, patterns and statistics. So I made studies in those domains. And then I also studied data science. And my career has progressed from financial services, where I basically cut my teeth on old-fashioned databases, doing data management in acquisition, retention, and fraud detection programs. And data and the use of data to create value has then become a core of what I've done throughout my career. I moved to the US fairly on in my career. And there I saw the advantage of using large data sets to solve problems. I have worked in private equity. I worked for Montague, and I also went on to work for Microsoft. And I'm currently working as an independent across a number of private equity firms, helping them with diligence and value creation.
You've recently written a book, which is here on the table. Do you want to sort of give us some background in terms of, why did you write it, who it was for, who it was aimed at, and essentially what the thesis is behind the book?
Yeah, so I started thinking about the book as I was moving from private equity into Microsoft. And then when I was working for Microsoft, I saw the advantages that you have working for such an amazing large scalar company.
Yeah.
So the resources, the talent, the access that you have. And it contrasted a lot with my experience working in mid-market private equity, where you're met with a number of constraints. And in the real world, things just get more messy. You don't have extra resources to come in and help you solve problems. So I wanted to see really where value was being created with AI. And this was also before the first public release from OpenAI. I started doing the research for the book. And so that transitioned with the adoption of generative AI. And I wanted to see the difference between well-established companies and also newer companies born on the cloud 6-7 years ago, and contrast what they're doing and what they're actually able to achieve.
And then if we look at some of the success factors that have emerged whilst you've been driving the value of the AI, what would you say the sort of key success factors are across those businesses?
Yeah, I think it is really taking both a disciplined and experimental approach. And I'll bring that to life by saying that, I've come across in larger companies quite a lot of experimentation that isn't necessarily governed or measured. And I think people are getting very frustrated with that. But where I've seen success is because a lot of this tooling is new. We've got new releases all the time. So you have to experiment with it because you've got to test the limits with it as well. And that use of experimentation. The other key thing as well is not leaving people behind. So one of my interviews is with a very renowned software engineer who's now leading his own company. So he took for granted that everybody was behind him. And then he realized, in fact, not. And also when I was working at Microsoft, there was a very deliberate effort to upskill everybody, because it takes an effort like that for everybody to start using the tools and understand how they can benefit from them and integrate them into their workflows.
So there's a big part of it, a sort of a cultural shift into adopting AI.
Yes, and then also making, I would say, sized approaches to it. So not over scaling projects. So starting with what I call thin slicing into processes, and finding that part of the process that can be benefited by using AI. And also, I think now companies are beginning to realize that generative AI is useful for certain applications, but combined with more traditional software engineering and also machine learning, then you start to see a lot more gain. So I think all of those elements are very important. And then the technology capability underpinning that. So how technology is organized to serve the company, the safety of data. I think a lot of companies have been worried about the safety of data and using generative AI as well. So that all comes into play.
And then in terms of when we look at the opportunities and the risks for private equity, particularly from a sort of the value creation stage, what would you think I suppose those opportunities and risks are? And I suppose what would you say for an operating partner focusing on that value creation, that probably first, I don't know, I mean, you and I were having a conversation before about how long businesses are held for and so on and so forth. Instead of it being 3 to 5 years, we're now talking about 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
And I suppose in that value creation piece, it's really a question of sort of, what's essentially what I'm trying to say is what's the lowest hanging fruit?
Right. So let's
AI?
start with the lowest hanging fruit. The lowest hanging fruit is in sales and service. And there you've got, both sides of, growth and efficiency. So in service, we can see that there's I've got a lot of examples there of service being automated with AI using bots. You've got 65% gains. Clara downsized their service workforce by 3/4, I think, last year, and they posted 40 million in terms of profit. So there's a very good lever on the service side. Yep. Microsoft is claiming 75% more efficiency with their co-pilots, ServiceNow 50%. And then for sales, you're able to now, instead of a salesperson sending out 10 emails a day, using AI, you can send up to 3,000 in a week. So there's a big yep. difference there. So I think having the pipelines ready for sales and service, there's a big gain there for private equity. I think the sort of third area of priority is definitely in marketing. So companies that were creating bespoke sites for key large customers, you can now automate that. So I think there's a big gain there. And there are new companies that are emerging that are serving these categories that I'm talking about. I think also in the area of innovation, I've interviewed someone who's been using AI to come up and speed up the innovation process for a large consumer goods company, and that has paid a lot of dividends for them.
And when we think about the PE owners themselves, how can they be more prepared when it comes to spotting opportunities in this space?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, because I've come across recently some challenges in diligence. And I think in this current context, the unknown is not known always by the investment community. And the people who do know, those that are closer to the research, because they can see the horizon of innovation and actually what are the consequences of what's coming out now. So in a concrete example, which is in the US, there was a company, it does surveys, and they were advised that they couldn't use a synthetic persona to do a lot of these surveys, when actually they could, and they could go through 100 ideas with a synthetic persona created through generative AI, and they bring those ideas down to sort of 12 or less, and then they can introduce a human into the surveying process to get more refinement there. Yeah. And without asking the right questions, this company that the investors were going to invest in would have been completely disruptive, because others are going to do this. So if they didn't do that and didn't know it was possible, then their business model would be questionable moving forward. So I think what is known by some of the sort of traditional advisors coming in isn't as close to the research, where research can see further out in terms of Horizon 1, 2, and 3.
And then in terms of other examples of AI impact in private equity, you've, whilst writing the book and what you've seen of late, what changes are you seeing that sort of is coming through?
Yes, well, I think that the applications of generative AI and where we're seeing it being useful are a lot sharper now. So I think generative AI, we've seen it proven for knowledge retrieval. And I have an example where that is being used in a medical setting. It's a company that trains people on how to do sonograms. And what they've done is digitized 900 textbooks, X number of videos and other documents. And now the trainees are able to access that information in a lot more accurate and responsive way than they were able to before. And so that speeded up the training. I've got a case in obviously the legal profession for contract management, end to end. And there's a huge application. So this company was already using machine learning to do its work, but then generative AI has transformed what they're able to do, because it's very good at not only retrieving information but also summarizing information. And last year we saw, I've got an example in the book on agents as well, and there was a lot of talk about AI agents, and I think we've been in the phase of co-pilots, and now we're moving into the phase of agents. But what are these agents? And I think now that the talk in the AI community is much about AI agents on rails. So that's not expecting generative AI to solve everything, but it's actually using generative AI in combination with software engineering and more traditional AI techniques. For example, if a PE company was looking at scanning a number of businesses in a certain sector, to get all that information together into a way that they can interrogate it, you'd be actually using quite traditional software engineering techniques. But then if you apply generative AI on top of that, that is able, for example, to start interrogating that data aligned to, for example, 10 screening questions. So I think firms are getting smarter about how they're thinking about solutionizing.
2025, big year ahead for all of us. Lots of things happening around the world, but certainly from an AI perspective, what predictions can you see? What expectations going forwards, and so on and so forth?
Well, I think we're going to see more of these AI agents integrated into workflows. I don't see them taking over complete workflows. I mean, those that are very bullish on this are thinking about them, in line with how automation came into automotive factories, where they really accelerated production by 250%. Now, that means replacing 2.5 people, at a time with these agents. And I think we're away from that. But what I think is that we're going to see, as we were discussing, that combination of solutions coming together in these agents applied into business workflows. And I think we're going to see the provision of, from some of the top technology firms, of AI lockdown within certain industries. So I think we're going to see sort of a healthcare cluster, which builds on their cloud story as well. So I think we're going to see much more focused industry application.
And do you see any particular sectors that in 25 will really benefit, or those particular sectors you think that might really accelerate as a result of it?
I've always been surprised about where the application is, and I was discussing this with somebody in financial services, and the application of it is really dependent on how hard the industry is going to resist it. And that is one of the key...
I suppose it comes back to leadership again, doesn't it?
It does, but and so you will find industries. Let's talk about manufacturing, and some companies within the manufacturing industry are going to run away with it. I think within healthcare, it's more likely that you're going to see niche providers come in.
I suppose sort of one final question. Are there sort of three takeaways that you could, for operating partners listening to this video today, there's sort of three takeaways that you can sort of take away from today and look across their portfolio and look where they can possibly implement some of the advice that you could give them today?
Yeah, so have empathy for operating partners, having been an operating partner as well, and that you are constrained within the firm. You don't have huge teams. So I think it's very important to find the right ecosystem of partners to come in and support portfolio companies. I think it's very important to get in at diligence as well and spot the opportunities. I think operating partners also have a responsibility for helping educate the investors on live use cases. And I think everybody should be very literate in use cases that can be applied among, we've talked about service and sales. Those are really key areas. But which companies are doing that well? Let's go into the details. Let's have a look at the use cases there to be really ready with examples of, well, that's been proven, so we can de-risk that opportunity. And I think as well, it's really important not to just rely on established partners, but to look a little bit broader into where are the people who've got that horizon 2-3 thinking, to bring it in so that you don't get blindsided when you're making the investment. So I think, taking a strategic and deliberate approach to AI is really critical now.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch.